Monday, September 18th, and this is Geeknights. Tonight we will discuss the history of sound in personal computing. Let's do this!
Well, we're back from, if you can't guess, another somewhat crazy weekend.
Too crazy.
That wasn't too crazy. We've had crazier.
Yeah, but it was too crazy considering I haven't had a when was the last time we had a break weekend?
God, when was the last time I got a good night's sleep?
Yeah.
Not tonight, that's for sure.
No, not tonight. It's too late.
Yeah, but we went off into the city with our friends Kate and Adam and with Emily to do some, well, Scott didn't participate because he is a pansy, but the rest of us did Japanese-style karaoke.
It's not because I'm a pansy, it's because I don't want to waste my time doing stupid karaoke.
You just don't get it. The sheer joy of singing Michael Jackson's Beat It in a British accent was
I rest my case.
Anyway, as usual, it's Monday and we're exhausted.
All right, so you want to just jump right into this news here?
I think we should. I don't really want to talk about how tired I am.
Yeah, I got nothing else. So, apparently these guys, in the quest to keep their computers cold without making lots of noise, decided that they were going to use the technology of ionization to keep their computers cold. Now, if you don't know, there are these air filters that you can buy, or air purifiers.
You mean the old lady killers?
Exactly.
Okay.
And what these things do is...
kill old ladies.
Exactly. They're basically these air filters you can buy that they do filter the air. They're not lying about that, using ions.
I'm curious, Scott, do you know how they actually work?
Barely.
Okay. You create a charge, right?
Yep.
And most little static bits are often also somewhat charged. So you attract them to a plate. It's the same reason that dust is attracted to your computer monitor.
Uh-huh.
And why TVs always get covered in dust, computers always get covered in dust, everything electronic gets covered in dust.
So you basically just make an electronic thing to gather the dust.
Kinda, yeah.
So somehow they use this to move air. And keep their computers cold, and of course it's quiet because it's just electricity. There's no moving parts, there's nothing vibrating, there's nothing to make noise, and it worked. It cost $1,000 for the kit, but it worked.
Did you actually read the article as to how this works?
There's only like a paragraph here.
So we're not going to have some sort of cool in-depth discussion of how this technology is cool and how it works and why you should all care about it?
We should care about it because it's a bad idea because you're going to fill your house with ozone and die.
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily, but probably.
I mean, a lot of those early ionizers made a lot of ozone, but, my Atari made a lot of ozone, too.
Yeah, not as much as this thing, though.
I don't know. My Atari made a lot of ozone. It smelled like a thunderstorm after I played that thing.
Well, the other reason I chose this story is because it's on Engadget, and Engadget upgraded today to the new Engadget.
Now, here's the sad part. Scott said, they upgraded Engadget. It's awesome. Go look. So I went, and I didn't notice any difference at all. It didn't look any different to me. He had to point out what they had changed.
Well, the interesting things they've done is, number one, to post a comment on Engadget, you used to have to confirm every comment by email, which is a nightmare, and it really... Well, no, it didn't hinder commenting on Engadget at all. People still posted a bajillion comments. But
why do we change our forums to be that? We have to personally approve each and every message people post.
That's not a good idea. We already personally approve each and every person. I think that's enough. But it did make the reading comments on Engadget basically impossible and useless. Now there's comment moderation and everything. So, and also comment threading. So you can read the comments and they make sense and they're useful. The other thing they did is if you have a big monitor, the pictures on Engadget are now high resolution and they will expand on your bigger screens and also contract on your smaller screens. So
no, they won't contract on the smaller screens at all.
As long as it's not, I think 1024 by 768 is the minimum resolution.
I'm at a higher resolution than that, and I could not make the image be any smaller or larger than it was.
Oh, I don't know. It works. I did it at work where the screen's bigger. I had two screens at work, and I just stretched it across both screens, and it went bloop. So it's for people with wide screens, basically. You know, the widescreen monitors or giant projectors or HD TVs or what have you. But yeah, Engadget is cooler now. If you like gadgets, I don't know why you're not reading Engadget.
Well, you could read Gizmodo.
Yeah, which has some problems. It's basically, they were both basically equal back in the day, but over time, Engadget has been, beating Gizmodo punch for punch.
I pretty much just read Slashdot and Kotaku, and I ignore the whole Gadget thing.
And Gadget also has a fun podcast, which is cool.
All right.
I know you listen to podcasts because you're listening to this.
Nah, remember, a lot of our listeners don't listen to other podcasts.
Yeah, but, they listen to at least one podcast. They might listen to two.
They might
especially
not.
if they're
for all you know, they're listening on some pirate radio station somewhere.
Hey, if you're playing us on a pirate radio station, we don't care. We want it because you're allowed to with the Creative Commons. Just tell us about it. Don't be all secret.
Thing is, they don't even have to tell us the way we set it up.
Yeah, but they do have to give us credit.
Yeah.
So they have to tell the people that are listening to us on the pirate radio station what they're listening to.
But do they really? Because we give ourselves credit, unless they cut off the closing bit, even though the closing bit is old and out of date, and Season 2 will rectify that.
I think the license actually says, they have to credit. It's like they have to do something. It can't just be us crediting ourselves.
Whatever.
Yeah.
I
Anyway,
really wouldn't care either way.
I don't really care either, but I would like to know. That's all I'd want to know. They should have a new Creative Commons license. Attribution, share alike, no commercial. Let us know. All right.
Yep. Anyway, this actually was somewhat surprising news because it goes against the trend of this entire industry for the past 2 decades, if not more. Now, a while ago, it came out that Universal was going to sue the ever-living hell out of YouTube for such horrible crimes as someone lip-syncing to one of their songs in a crappy resolution video.
Oh, shits.
They want to shut YouTube down because it does nothing but facilitate this grievous violation of copyright law. And, deprive their children of bread and all that sort of thing.
Have they heard of anime music videos?
You know what? I'm really surprised that the anime industry has gotten away completely unscathed so far in this AMV business.
Because the anime industry isn't making the AMVs, and they're not hosting the AMVs, and they're not promoting the AMVs.
Except that the conventions are straight up with tournaments.
They sure are, all these fan-run conventions.
Yeah. I mean, even Otakon, they escape any sort of ire about it.
Hey.
But the thing is, Warner Music has come out and said, you know what? YouTube can use any of the music videos we've got, and they can take any part of those music videos, which obviously includes the music in them, and do whatever they want in a non-commercial way. All they have to do is put it back on YouTube for other people to see.
Yep. I think that...
this might be the turn of the tide. This might be Gandalf standing here saying, I
think what it is that someone at Warner Music... There's someone there with a brain. Finally. There's someone at this place with a brain. And what they're thinking is, a music video isn't really like a creative work that you're trying to sell. It's an advertisement that you want as many people to see and hear as possible.
I mean, if you don't believe that, most music videos you just can't get. They're not available. It's not like you can buy a DVD that has all the music videos you want.
Sometimes you can. But
yeah, sometimes, but they're not out there.
Yeah, music videos are advertisements for bands. That's what they are. MTV is just a TV network that shows ads all day long. If it still showed videos, which it doesn't. But
you want to know how old we are? When MTV came about and we watched it as kids, the only non-music video content was like the night cartoon blog with Beavis and Butthead and Aaron Flux.
MTV News.
And MTV News.
Yep. Nowadays, it's pretty much all the music videos in like MTV too. But the point is that someone at Warner Music was saying, hey, if we put this shit on YouTube, it'll be like free advertising that billions of people, well, not billions, but millions of people will look at it constantly every day.
Isn't that what geeks and people who know better have been trying to tell the music industry for the last 20 fucking years?
Yeah, and one person finally said,
Now, this is big news for one reason alone. Universal is with the status quo, and Warner has just done something that, at least for the music industry, is absolutely batshit crazy.
I think it's only a matter of time before someone discovers like some unknown band that long ago signed like signed a record contract with Warner, made one music video and one album, then disappeared off the face of the earth because it didn't sell, and now it's going to become crazy popular.
Now, I wonder...
because someone's going to make a funny video like Numa Numa to it or something.
I'm waiting for the next thing to happen, the next company to react to this. Because if another company says, we're doing what Warner did, that is probably the beginning of a new era of copyright. Mm-hmm. And if that doesn't happen...
Here's the thing, though, is that even though they're giving the music videos away, which are essentially advertisements, there's still advertisements for the CDs and stuff. So they still need to have either the overpriced CDs or the DRM stuff, or at least they think they do, in order to sell something to you. This is just saying, all right, we were previously pretending our advertisements were products. Now we're not going to pretend that anymore. We're going to, put our advertisements to get as much exposure for them as possible. Watch our commercials all you want, but our product is still copyright, blah, 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 blah.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, now at least, because you can't, the argument that, I can just steal the music is separate from the argument that I can use the music to create better things non-commercially.
Mm-hmm.
If they're allowing the latter, I'm so much more okay with them cracking down on people who pirate the music. Because way back when this whole music industry thing and, MP3s really started getting bad and Napster suddenly got sued by a bunch of people, if the industry had been reasonable at all, at any point along the way, then it wouldn't have been an issue at all, because people probably would have generally said, yeah, we can't steal their music. But the record industry, they were just such dicks about it, to be perfectly blunt, that most people who knew better or who knew about the technology just said, you know what, fine, screw you, we're done with you, we're going to destroy your industry. There's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Also, another thing, though, is that if they're letting anyone, remix any of their songs in any way they want, of course it's within the confines of YouTube, but if they're doing that, right, one of the major arguments against all the things record companies are doing is you're hindering creativity, because now with copyright, no one can use fair use to your remix and create new things with your music. But if they're going to let people do that, then it really shoots a lot of arguments against them just gone. It's like, no, we're going to let you do all that. We're just not going to
No, you know what it doesn't shoot down, to be a cynic here?
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't shoot down the economics argument.
But yeah, it does shoot down a whole lot of the arguments.
In the very least, I expect to see a boom of Warner Music-related YouTube funny bits in the next several months.
I predict Warner Music will not do as well as music record companies did in their peak. However, they were going to beat the other record companies into the ground unless they follow suit.
Or at least they'll beat Universal.
Yeah.
Because Universal now has basically infinite bad press among geeks.
Yep.
It's me, your ice hockey. I'm here to kick your ass.
Not a thing of the day.
Yeah, you see, we mentioned last week, and for all of our new listeners, this isn't what we normally do, but we're doing something different because it's a very special time of the year.
Yes, if you are not aware, training camp for the NHL has just ended, and the preseason is starting any minute now.
Now, many of you are geeks, and some of you are nerds. And since the show is Geeknights, it's definitely not an insult to call you either one of those, because we are also self-identified. But you might be wondering, why are Rim and Scott, the hosts of Geeknights, about to talk about sports, something that traditionally is anathema to nerds?
Because sports aren't all bad.
And in fact, while we talk a lot about geekery, and we cover the main geekeries, but you can be a geek in anything. I mean, there are car geeks, there are sports geeks.
Yeah.
There are also car nerds and sports nerds.
They're scarier. You
Yes.
You want to avoid those people.
I mean, when a lot of people talk about, we had a guy in the forums who went nuts about this, about, damn those jocks with their stupid sports and our sports-centric culture.
And that's,
You call them a jock, but they're really just a sports nerd because they can only identify with other people through sports, but they're no better off or worse off than a chess nerd.
Yeah, it's just that old stereotype of, Revenge of the Nerds against the evil jocks.
Nerds!
Yeah, them tri-lambs, but it's really, we don't see that as really existing. I mean, we went to a tech school, the nerdiest school in the world, right?
It was also one of the most Hockeyan schools in the world.
Yeah, but the ice hockey team, man, if that arena wasn't full for every goddamn home game.
Now, also, as another good thing, when we're talking about hockey, right? It seems that of all of these sports in the U.S., the major sports, hockey has probably the biggest nerd and geek following of any of them.
Well, it seems to be that way.
I mean, a lot of the big tech schools, though it might be simply because the tech schools happen to be a lot in the north and the East.
Or it's that the non-tech schools concentrate so heavily on other sports that the only place the tech schools can get an edge in any sport is the less popular ice hockey. Or it's because, we happen to be in the north, very close to Canada, above the Messier line. Yeah, this is an old joke. I don't know. I've looked for the picture online. I can't find it again, but this is funny map on the internet that someone drew, and they basically drew a horizontal line across the middle of the United States, and it says this is the Messier line, and above the Messier line, which is the top half of the United States and Canada, it says hockey, and below that line it says no hockey. Now there are many NHL teams below the Messier line, like the Florida Panthers or
That is not, however, hockey.
The Nashville Predators. But anyone who lives above the Messier line is like, whatever.
Yeah. Now, we're geeks. We are super geeks. But we are also really into hockey.
And not just ice hockey for the NES, which is the best sports game ever.
Yes. Now, someday we're going to tell the stories of the hockey games at RIT.
Mm-hmm.
Because RIT hockey was probably one of the greatest things that ever happened to me in college.
Indeed.
I mean, it's in the top 10 at least.
However, to get to the point, to celebrate the beginning of a new ice hockey season, the second ice hockey season since the danged unspeakable strike. Oh, I just spoke of it, but yeah.
Good job.
Which ruined much of hockey. We are going to attempt to slightly promote hockey by showing you the most entertaining part of hockey all this week for Things of the Day. It is now,
Hockey Fight Week.
All hockey fights, all the time.
Now, remember that with each fight we're going to try to highlight a different aspect of hockey, but there are non-fighting aspects to hockey, and we enjoy those too. We enjoy them very much. However, hockey fights are freaking hilarious, even if you don't like hockey.
That's the point. That's the reason we've chosen hockey fights as our. We're not going to show you amazing goals, because if you don't like hockey, the goal isn't going to be amazing or exciting.
Yeah. Plus, the goal doesn't mean anything really, unless you know the teams behind it and you care and you're curious, and it's not that. But anyone can appreciate two guys punching each other in the face for like 2 minutes until one of them passes out.
Even a complete total chess nerd.
Chess boxing.
Now,
I'll start with my thing of the day because I chose it for a very specific reason. In addition to showing a fantastic hockey fight, a hockey fight that I was in the arena live to watch in person, but it also illustrates that hockey fighting isn't just two guys beating each other up. There's a lot to it, and hopefully you'll kind of get a perspective as to why hockey fights are so absolutely freaking amazing.
And why there are fights in hockey and not in other sports, and why that's okay.
Yeah, how rare is there, you're watching a baseball game and suddenly there's a fight.
Yeah, like a few times a year. And there's about as many hockey fights in a week of hockey as there are in a year of baseball.
There are about as many hockey fights as there are periods of ice hockey in a given season.
Lol.
All right, so I grew up in Hockey Town, Detroit. Detroit is one of the most hockey-centric cities in the non-Canadian northern United States. Hockey is big there. Hockey is big there like Jesus is big in Spain. And there was this man named Claude Lemieux, who he is pretty much widely regarded by even many of his own teammates back in the day as the cheapest, wimpiest, turtling, yet fight-causing, annoying pest to ever be a hockey player. This guy was responsible for so many fights. He injured players all the time. But whenever he got into a fight, his typical reaction was to turtle, meaning he'd curl up in a ball and hope that the referee saved him.
Awesome.
Now, he was responsible for a lot of horrific injuries, but there was also, he played for the Colorado Avalanche back then. And the Colorado Avalanche and the Detroit Red Wings had this crazy, crazy rivalry going on.
A bunch of Russian guys pissed off at a bunch of Canadian guys.
Pretty much. There were no Americans involved.
Yeah.
And what happened was that at one point, Claude Lemieux got this really cheap shot and hurt one of the Red Wings. Now, they were going to take it, and they weren't going to deal with this. They weren't going to take it. This was the end. So they had one of the enforcers on the team. Now, here's some terminology for you. If you're a fan of a hockey team, the big guys who cause fights are called enforcers because they protect your good players from the other team's thugs. And now, any other hockey team that you are not a fan of, their big guys are thugs, and all they do is start fights unjustly.
That is correct.
So basically, they hated Claude Lemieux, and now there's about to be a face-off. They're about to drop the puck. The Red Wing immediately jumps him and beats the ever-living hell out of him.
That's what he does.
That's all I got to say about that.
Yeah.
Just watch the video. It'll probably explain a little bit about how hockey fights come about and why they're the way they are. At least a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Now, me, who was born in Queens, New York, and grew up in Connecticut, is a...
Me is?
Yes, me is. I'm getting ready for Pirate Day. I am, by genetics, I think, a fan of the New York Rangers, who play in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, and are the most expensive team in hockey.
Yeah, you know what
terms
Madison Square Garden doesn't have? It doesn't have a statue of Joe Louis's fist.
I don't know. It has Madison Square Garden.
Joe Louis's fist!
Whatever.
It's huge!
Anyway. And they are the most expensive. I'm not sure if they're still the most expensive team, but in terms of what it costs to pay all their players, they're the most expensive team in hockey. And I think it's the only team that, like, every single relative I have is a fan of the Rangers, and we care more about the hockey than the other sports, even though, you know, we kind of care about the other sports. But anyway, when I was really watching, like, every Ranger game on MSG every night when I was a kid, you know, the enforcer of the Rangers, the key one, was a man named Ulf Samuelsson. It's obviously of Northern European descent. And he was a large, dangerous, and scary man.
Yep, we had a man named Shanahan.
Yeah, but Ulf Samuelsson, I would see him about, a few times a week, beat the shit out of somebody. Well, I went and I searched for him on the YouTube and the Google video, and I found only one video for you to see Ulf Samuelsson in action. And this isn't a video of Ulf Samuelsson beating anyone up. This is a video of another hockey player, Ty Domi, who is also an ass, a thug, if you will, from some other team that isn't even worth mentioning, who takes a cheap shot at Ulf Samuelsson and knocks him out.
In pretty much one hit.
Basically, what had happened was, I'm linking to the 10-second video, but you'll see in YouTube there's another video with a different camera angle that's like 2 minutes long. And that will let you see the whole situation where Ty Domi tripped Ulf Samuelsson. That got him a 2-minute penalty, which means he's out of the game because there's only less than 2 minutes left in the game. So they're going to have a power play no matter what, and he's out of the game for the rest of this game no matter what. So why not punch Ulf Samuelsson in the face and injure him, and then he'll be out of the game too, and you'll at least take someone with you. So that's exactly what he did, and they bring out the stretcher to carry Ulf away, and it's pretty entertaining to show you that it goes both ways in the hockey fights.
Like a bisexual.
Exactly.
Anyway, we're not going to dwell on that anymore.
No, tomorrow we're just going to go with 2 hockey fights.
Yeah, I hope that wasn't too much needless exposition, but we really wanted to set the stage because I can guarantee to you that the magnitude of the videos we'll be linking to this week will only increase.
Yeah, if you think that these hockey fights are like, oh, shits, wait till you see the hockey fights you're going to link to tomorrow, the next day, the next day.
Yep.
And don't spoil it by going around Google Video and YouTube just searching for hockey fights, because that's,
Yeah, we're basically doing kind of we'll give you the cream of the crop here.
Yeah, we filter it for you. If you go searching around looking at everything yourself, what's the point? All right.
And of course, it'll culminate in Thursday where there's a good chance we'll talk about hockey. Straight up.
That'll be crazy. Anyway.
All right, so on to the main bit, which is partly a cop-out because we're exhausted, and if you can't tell,
it was the only thing we came up with.
We're trying to finish this show so I can go to bed.
Yep. We're going to talk to you today about the history of sound and sound cards and sound chips in personal computers.
Yep, not so much from the technical perspective, because I doubt many of you care, and because if we get anything wrong, James will yell at us.
Well, someone will yell at us.
Yeah. Well, if we get anything wrong about the electronics, James will yell at us. If we get anything wrong about the music or the chips there, Ken will yell at us.
Yeah, someone will yell at us. We're going to, be a lot of our stuff we're just reading off the internet. But we've done a bunch. It's a collected research to save you time.
Yeah.
And also to teach you and hopefully entertain.
Now, you kids, I don't want to call you kids, but you kids have it easy today because any sound card works. I mean, you buy a new computer, there's probably just a sound card that'll work fine, just built into the motherboard.
Mm-hmm.
Every computer, you just don't even worry about it. Sound cards are a commodity. They're pretty much all the same. There's no reason to even worry about them at all unless you're making music. And even then, your options are fairly limited. Back in the day, wasn't quite like that. Before sound blasters, there really wasn't sound in computers the way you think about sound.
All right, well, I think the one technical thing we have to talk about is the difference between PCM and synthesizers.
Yeah, well, it also, people will remember MIDI.
Yeah, well, MIDI is related to that. But
yeah.
Basically, a synthesizer is a musical instrument. It's an electronic musical instrument, but it is an instrument nonetheless. What a synthesizer does is it takes some sort of inputs, digital inputs, usually dials, switches, sometimes even analog inputs, like some waves or something. And then there is some sort of logic in a chip. And what it does is it takes based upon the inputs, it generates some sort of analog output. So it's basically a machine that makes waves and sounds in a certain way, where if you keep giving it, the same input, if you set the dials to the same place and push the same buttons, it'll make the same sound. And that's what a synthesizer is. And back in the day, most sound chips in computers, because this wasn't in the day of sound cards. This was in the days where you had an Apple II and there was a sound chip in the computer and that was it. Or you had a Macintosh 512K, and in the Macintosh was a sound chip and that was it.
Or if any of you were too young for that, a Nintendo or a Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
Those things could make PCM. They could play that. But for the most part, the vast majority of what you heard was synthesized using square waves, sawtooth waves, triangle waves.
Yep. It was basically, there was an instrument inside your computer, a chip that was also a musical instrument, and the computer programs, your games or your software or your operating system or some other program on your computer would send digital information or do some computation, and then based upon that computation send digital control signals, zeros and ones, to the musical instrument to play it. So it was as if there was a little man inside your computer who was sending zeros and ones to a musical instrument, and depending on which zeros and ones he sent, he was playing that instrument. It was pretty crazy because each computer had a different instrument in it, so each computer made different music.
Yep, you really couldn't rely on a computer to sound the same, especially when it came to even later on with things like MIDI. Now, MIDI is a lot more complicated than I'm going to make it out to be, and it's not actually, people think MIDI is just a kind of music file, and that's not at all what it is. It's just, it's basically sheet music for a computer. You put it in, and it says, oh, I'll make this instrument play this, and this instrument play this. And a lot of games back in the day used MIDI to make the music. And also, a lot of people collected MIDI files. And for the most part, they sounded completely different on everyone's computer because everyone had different little instruments stored in their MIDI.
Mm-hmm. And that was in the days where you could even change what instruments were stored in there. A lot of people it was the default one and that was it.
Yep.
Now, back in the day, what you had, in an Apple II GS, had, this Ensoniq chip, which was, the same one that was in professional synthesizers. But then the Commodore was the most famous. It had the SID chip.
Now, you may remember the SIDs from some bands that we like. One band.
Like Machina Supremacy?
Possibly.
Yeah. There's also, on OC Remix, there's a lot of Commodore 64 remixes. And the SID chip is a very famous chip because the way, something to do with the manufacturer. I don't remember exactly what, but no two SID chips sound exactly the same as each other. And it has a very distinctive sound that sounds like nothing else. So when you hear Commodore music, you go, oh, and you know that is a famous, very important sound chip. But things didn't get interesting until the ad-lib came out.
Yep, ad-lib, and then not too long after that, Sound Blaster.
Yeah, it wasn't until, before the PC, the IBM PC, every computer was a special device. You had an Apple II, and you got Apple II software. You had a Commodore, you got Commodore software. You had an Amiga, you got Amiga software.
But PCs were standard. I mean, you had a PC. You could everyone was the same, and then
everyone had DOS or Windows on their PC, and then you could put any hardware in there.
So you could buy standard peripherals, like buy a drive, and you'd know that drive could work on any one of these, and that they would all work the same.
Yep. So the first real, popular, well-used sound card was the Ad-Lib. And the Ad-Lib was basically a synthesizer on a board. And they made this thing, and they sold it, and everyone got one if they wanted sound in their PC.
Now, it wasn't that great, and it didn't really explode until not too long after the Sound Blasters, which were very similar to the Ad-Libs.
Well, what happened was the Ad-Lib was actually a very simple card to make. So once everyone bought an Ad-Lib, they looked at it, and they said, I can make that. And they went to Radio Shack, and they bought a bunch of chips, and they made it.
Yeah.
And so everyone and their mother was selling Ad-Lib cards. And, some of them sounded different, but that didn't matter. The Sound Blaster 1.0 was basically an Ad-Lib card with a single PCM channel and a game port, which is very important.
Yes, because remember, back in the day, there was no USB. If you wanted to have a joystick, basically the only way that would happen was you had a serial joystick, which sucked.
Sucked ass.
There were some parallel peripherals, which also sucked for reasons we don't want to get into.
Yeah, you could plug your joystick into the printer port, which sucked.
Yeah, or you could have a sound card that had a game controller, and many sound cards also had CD-ROM controllers, because CD-ROMs weren't IDE back then.
No, they weren't.
CD-ROMs were this special thing, and sound cards, for various reasons that we're not going to get into, ended up also being CD-ROM controllers and joystick controllers.
Yeah, part of it had to... Well, the reasons they were joystick controllers, because the game port, the port that old school PC game pads and joysticks plugged into on the sound card, was also the same kind of hole that MIDI controllers and MIDI devices go into.
Well, it wasn't the same kind of hole for the most part, but it was pin identical in that you could plug a thing into it and just route the pins to different shaped connectors, and they would have two standard MIDI holes.
Yep. So they had they put a hole, a little connector on the sound card that you would use for MIDI, and then they could also use it for video game controllers.
I remember I had a little device that would plug into my game port, and then it split off into two MIDIs, and it extended the joystick part so I could keep my joystick plugged in. Of course, I had to make sure not to futz with my joystick while I was recording music or anything. Yeah. But we'll skip a whole bunch of history up until pretty much the revolution in sound when the Sound Blaster 16 came out. That was the first modern sound card.
It was indeed.
It is the first sound card that would basically be able to do almost all the things that your sound card today can do. It could play music at normal bit rates, at normal sampling rates. It could play more than one sound at the same time. It was pretty much, that was when sound started mattering in games.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to mention. See, we've been talking about synthesizing up until now. PCM, which is all I'm going to call it right now instead of confusing you, is pretty much all you're doing with your sound card today. PCM is a way of representing sound as a bunch of zeros and ones. Modern sound cards, all you're really doing is sending them PCM, and then they turn the PCM into sound, and you hear it.
Yep, so now some games use synthesized music, but usually what'll happen is the game will synthesize it itself in the software and then send the result to your sound card. That way, no matter what sound card you have, it'll always sound the same.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you have a CPU in your computer. That is a processor which can process anything, and you can send it any software you want, and it'll do it. So you can write a piece of software that does the same thing as a very old synthesizer or a very new synthesizer. And if the CPU is fast enough, it can take, any inputs, process them in the same way the synthesizer would, get PCMs, send the PCMs to your sound card, and you'll hear it. That's how it works.
Now, pretty much back then, in order to use a sound card, you had to, especially in games, you had to know a lot about your sound card. You had to know how it was configured. You had to know all the BIOS stuff that was set up. And each game had to specifically support each sound card. So you'd buy a game like TIE Fighter, and then you'd run the setup program, and it would say, what sound card do you have? And it would have a list of like 10. And if you didn't have one of those 10, it was probably not going to work.
Yeah.
Now, the list was like 7 Sound Blaster cards, 2 ad-lib cards, and then an other that never worked.
Well, the famous one is Wolfenstein 3D. In the options menu, had 3 choices: ad-lib, Sound Blaster, and none. Those are your 3 choices. But eventually, because what was happening was most people went with Sound Blasters, and other people wanted to also be able to sell sound cards, they ended up making their sound cards Sound Blaster compatible. So if you chose Sound Blaster, it would still work. And so the way they, got around this problem of everyone had to, make their software specific to one sound card is by making all the sound cards the same.
Yep. God, my first computer came with it was an HP that came with a Fort 16 sound card, and God, was that thing ass.
My Aptiva came with a Sound Blaster 16.
See,
Old
I went
school, at perfect run-of-the-mill ISA card.
I convinced my parents, and I went out, and I bought, physically, for quite a bit of money, a Sound Blaster AW, which stands for Advanced Wave Effects 32.
Yeah, it wasn't until I got my Pentium 3 450 that I bought a Sound Blaster Live value, because I didn't need the non-value, and it was a lot of money.
Yeah, I bought the Live way, way later, and I got the Platinum for various reasons. But the AW32 was one of those few, not life-changing, but one of those moments in computing where a whole bunch of computer knowledge suddenly all clicked together for me. Like, I remember the exact moment, because I had the game TIE Fighter, and I had this Fort 16 sound card. And TIE Fighter was great, but the music really sucked. It just sounded like crap. And the sound effects, like, if more than a few sounds were playing at the same time, it just broke, and it didn't work. So I install this AW32, and after a few hours, I get it working, and then eventually I decide to play TIE Fighter. So I run the setup, and I set it up separately, because the AW32 acted like 2 different sound cards. So I told the game that use the Sound Blaster 16 in that sound card for the sound, and use the AW32, which I wasn't sure what that stood for or what it did, for the music. And the music in TIE Fighter was just MIDI. So then I started up the game, and instead of hearing the tinny, crappy, Star Wars theme, I heard the Star Wars theme. And then I realized what MIDI really was and why it sounded different, and suddenly this whole world of music clicked before me.
Yeah, see, I didn't realize. See, when I had that Sound Blaster 16, I had a lot of MIDIs, and pretty much in those days, people made MIDIs out of Sound Blaster 16, so they sounded the same because everyone had the same card.
Yeah, if anyone is old enough, you might remember Vikram's MIDI repository, which was pretty much the biggest MIDI site ever.
Yep. And then I took those MIDIs onto my new computer, and I played them. And it sounded like the computer was trying to make them sound better, but they ended up not sounding the way I remember them, so I was kind of unhappy.
Yeah.
And then I realized what was going on much later.
So I remember playing around with sound fonts and trying to make my own instruments.
Yeah, sound fonts basically let you change what instruments are in your sound card. So if a program tries to play the synthesizer in your sound card with MIDI, you can choose, don't use that guitar, use this guitar. Or don't use those drums, use this set of drums. And then you can make it sound different.
Yep, because this was days before MP3s, so I collected a lot of MIDI files. And I also had a really nice digital piano. So and I still have that piano to this day. My parents got it for me way, way back. But what I'd often do when I was in the computer room doing stuff is I'd plug the MIDI into the piano, and I'd play piano MIDI files, which basically meant that I had a player piano that would play anything I could find on the internet perfectly like a real piano.
Mm-hmm.
And it was great. That was what I listened to, because there were no MP3s back then. That was the kind of music you listened to on a computer.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, I also had the problem of all these sound cards we've talked about until the Sound Blaster Live were ISA, which means it plugged into the big black slot that probably doesn't exist on any of your computers.
No, it probably doesn't.
Now, I also had an ISA network card for my cable modem way, way back, which meant that whenever I was on the internet and I was downloading anything, pretty much every packet that came in would make the sound skip a little bit. So I'd pause my music whenever I was downloading something.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah. Then one day, because I didn't even realize I had an ISA network card, because the cable guy came and he put the network card in our computer. Because they actually gave everyone who signed up for this trial cable modem a network card, because no one had them back then. And then one day I knew about my computer, so I look in, it was an ISA card. I'm like, what the fuck? And I went out and bought a PCI network card for $60.
Well, they probably bought around ISA cards because very few people had PCI in those days.
I had 2 slots, and one of them was empty, and that bastard didn't put it in there.
Yeah, I remember that.
I had 6 ISAs.
That
and 2
was the
PCIs.
time when my 486 couldn't keep up with games anymore. I wanted to play Jedi Knight 1, and it said requirement, PCI video card, and I didn't have one of those. I had an onboard 1 megabyte Cirrus Logic video card, which couldn't do much more than Doom and Doom 2 and all that. But it did those hella well. That's for sure.
Yeah, I also had my like graphics blaster Extreme from Creative.
Yeah. So anyway, the sound cards. Nowadays, we have 2 magic things that make sound cards work really nicely and all the same. One of those magic things is called DirectX. And if you're on Linux, also. And if you're on OS X, I don't know what the hell they call it, but it's there. And
it's one of the few things that Microsoft has done right.
yeah. What DirectX does, if you don't understand it already, and specifically in this case, Direct Sound, but all of DirectX is the same basic thing, is remember how we said in the olden days, if you were running a DOS game, you had to tell it which sound card you had, and the game had to include different code for playing sound based on which sound card you had. And this got troublesome because, like I said, everyone just ended up making all the sound cards the same, which really hindered development of new sound card technologies.
Yeah, because you could put a lot of awesome stuff in a sound card, like just effects or noise cleanup stuff, but if the software didn't use any of that, you either had to put all of that logic in the hardware and thus make it difficult to change, or break the standard.
Yep. So, and no one was going to write, code for your specific sound card into their game if you didn't pay them a lot of money, and if no one had your sound card. If it's not going to sell them more copies of the game, what do they care? So DirectX, what it does is it means that only DirectX has to know about all the different sound cards in the world. DirectX, Microsoft and whoever makes drivers and support for every different sound card in the entire universe. And then when you write a game and you want to put sound in that game, you don't care what sound card they have. You just write code for Direct Sound. You say, play these sounds, Direct Sound. And then Direct Sound figures out what kind of sound card you have and plays the sound to the best of its ability. So if you're writing any sort of software now, you just program the sound the way you want, and you don't have to worry about which sound card or what video card or what network card the computer that the game player happens to have. And that's what that's all about.
Yeah, now, if you weren't that interested in this episode, I'll be perfectly honest that it was a cop-out.
It was a cop-out.
We came up with a bunch of good ideas for future Mondays, but they all required a little bit of research, a little bit of effort, or a little bit of anything that we weren't willing to put forth today.
Yeah. Oh, the last thing I'll talk about it very briefly is AC97. You'll see a lot of people talking about AC97. You'll see it on sound cards and stuff. That's just a way of talking to sound card that is a standard that Intel came up with in 1997. And it basically allows, the CPU to send a lot of PCMs to the sound card, which is all people do these days.
I'll bet that no one cared about that last bit you just added in.
Yeah, I just wanted it because I always...
Why? You know why you put that in? You put that in because you looked it up a little while ago.
It's because I keep seeing AC97 on like every sound card, and I always wondered what the hell it was. So now anyone else who's wondering what the hell that was, now you know.
You know what? I'm asking my listeners out here. Did any of you not know what that was and care? I'm curious.
I bet at least one person didn't know what AC97 was, and now they're going, oh, it's something that allows...
Yeah, but I'm asking you to look deep in your heart and wonder if you really cared.
Did you really care about anything in this episode?
Yeah, this episode was a total cop-out.
Whee!
Don't worry, the rest of the week will be awesome. We've actually got really good topics lined up.
Yeah, all right, come on, people. We're having a little bit of difficulty coming up with Monday ideas.
No, we're not. We have plenty of Monday ideas. The problem is, every time Monday comes around, we're exhausted from the weekend.
Exactly. We need Monday ideas that don't require research, effort, or preparation.
Oh, great.
So if you have any Monday show ideas, technology, science, sci-fi...
Aside from the hundreds that have already been put in the forum.
There actually, I looked through, and there weren't that many Monday ones in there. There were mostly Thursday ones. And a lot of them we did already. It was, and anyway...
We didn't do security. We didn't do networking.
Yeah.
We didn't do voting machines.
We got to work up to that,
No, we don't.
Yeah,
we just have to not be tired.
It's never going to happen.
It might happen next weekend because all we got is that metal concert.
and
Okay.
that Jewish holiday.
Well, no, you have the Jewish holiday.
and
the
then
rest of us-
Sunday is like Spirit of Beacon Day.
Oh, yeah, we'll take Pete and Jess out to that
Yeah.
for some hijinks.
Yep.
Anyway, look forward to the rest of Hockey Fight Week, and look forward to us not being quite so tired tomorrow.
Hooray! Tomorrow be Talk Like a Pirate Day.
Yar! And that was Geek Nights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for our opening theme.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com. If you like our podcasts, you'll love our forums. Make sure you visit them. You can send your email feedback to geeknights@gmail.com. And if you want, you can leave us a voicemail at 206-333-1537.
Geek Nights airs every weeknight, Monday through Thursday.
Geeknights is recorded with absolutely no studio and no audience. But unlike those other talk shows, it's actually recorded at night.